Hey everyone, I'm Brendan Kelleher. From its very beginning in 1966, the fictional universe of Star Trek has been a result of many different writers and directors. Although created by Gene Roddenberry, the universe has been expanded upon and built upon his original ideas. Like every fictional universe, however, there are going to be inconsistencies. Sometimes these are just mistakes that simply were not noticed at the time. You watch the second pilot of Star Trek the Original Series in 1966, and the show looks a lot different from the series that followed. The uniforms were different. Sulu had a different job description, going from scientist to helmsman in the space of a week. The Star Trek movies that were produced between 1979 and 2016 obviously had much higher production values than the TV series, but were written by writers who, let's face it, were not infallible. They made mistakes, or they knew they made creative decisions that didn't necessarily make sense, but did them anyway for whatever reason. Whether it was just to move the story along or they hoped that nobody would notice. Yeah, right. Now, I really enjoy all the Star Trek movies to a certain extent. Some more than others. But they all have plot holes. In most cases, I can ignore them and enjoy the story. But just for fun, I thought I would highlight one big plot hole for every Star Trek film. Star Trek the Motion Picture. In the very first Star Trek movie, set 10 years after the conclusion of the TV series, Kirk, now an admiral, resumes command of the Starship Enterprise and gathers his old crew together to intercept the threat of a huge alien entity known only as Voyager heading for Earth. After managing to make somewhat peaceful contact with the entity, Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Captain Decker, and the android copy of the deceased, Lieutenant Ilea, venture inside the huge alien ship to make contact with Voyager directly. Kirk and his crew soon discover that the main core of Voyager resembles that of an ancient satellite from the 20th century. And get this, Kirk wipes off some dirt on its nameplate to discover its actual name is Voyager. The Voyager 6 space probe, in fact. Spock deduces that Voyager 6 was found by an alien race of machines, and discovered its programming to learn all that is learnable, and built this entire ship for it. So here's the thing. These aliens, who were so technically advanced that they built this gigantic ship that can disintegrate entire ships and destroy planets, by the way, somehow couldn't figure out to wipe some dirt off its nameplate to discover its name was Voyager, not Voyager? That is pretty dumb if you ask me. It makes even less sense that Starfleet would be completely undefended except by one ship that's undergoing maintenance in dry dock. Star Trek II: The Wrath of Khan. Star Trek II is regarded by most fans of the franchise as being the best of the movie series. And for good reason. It was a huge improvement on the first movie, with a great story, great action, and the very best villain of the series in Khan Noonien Singh, played to perfection by Ricardo Montalban. Early in the movie, the Starship Reliant, on a scientific mission for the Genesis project, arrives in orbit of the planet which they think is Ceti Alpha 6. When Captain Terrell and Chekhov beam down to the desolate planet, they are soon captured by Khan and his people. This comes as a surprise to Chekhov, as he thought Khan had been stranded on the neighbouring planet of Ceti Alpha 5. Khan soon tells them that the planet they're on is Ceti Alpha 5. Its sun went nova 6 months after they were left there by Kirk in the original series episode Space Seed. So basically, the crew of the Reliant mistook Ceti Alpha 5 for Ceti Alpha 6. As Homer Simpson would say, "You're telling me that the Reliant, with all its sensor equipment, failed to figure out on arriving in the system that Ceti Alpha 6 had exploded? It's a planet, for crying out loud. Did they not see that the orbit of the planet that they were looking at had shifted, as Khan explained to them later? Could they not tell the difference between the two planets? Kirk had dropped off Khan here 15 years previously, so surely there would be some scientific information on the system. This is just dumb." And because of this stupidity, Khan and his followers escaped and killed a lot of people. Still a fantastic film though. Star Trek III: The Search for Spock. In Star Trek III, the Genesis planet was the result of Khan detonating the Genesis device at the end of the previous movie. When Kirk and his crew return to Earth, they are told that Project Genesis has become a galactic controversy, and that it is now a quarantine planet where no one but the science vessel USS Grissom are allowed to go. Kirk, after being told by Sarek that Spock's body, which is on the Genesis planet, must be returned to Vulcan, is forced to steal the Enterprise to get to Genesis, Meanwhile, a Klingon ship gets there before them and blows up the Grissom as they attempt to discover Genesis Project's secrets. Okay, so if Starfleet are taking this whole Genesis controversy so seriously by quarantining the planet, then why do they have such lousy security? The only ship that is there is the Grissom, which is a science vessel. Why are there not several heavily armed Federation ships guarding this place at all times if security is such an issue? It seems anybody is able to just go there without anyone stopping them. I realise the Klingon ship was cloaked, but Kirk and his crew are wanted by Starfleet and are able to get there with no ship stopping them. This makes absolutely no sense. Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home. I love Star Trek IV. It's one of my favourite Star Trek movies, and one of the more light-hearted ones in the franchise. The whole plot of the space probe trying to establish contact with humpback whales doesn't really hold up to scrutiny, however. That's not the plot hole I'm going to point out here, though. Early in the film, there's a Federation Council meeting where the Klingons are demanding Kirk's extradition from Vulcan, because he killed the crew of a Klingon ship by activating the auto-destruct sequence of the Enterprise, which the Klingons boarded shortly beforehand. We see all this being played out on a giant screen for the whole council, as we see footage of the Klingons boarding the Enterprise and exterior shots of the ship blowing up. My question is, where's all this footage coming from? While it's in actual fact movie footage from Star Trek 3, in the universe of the actual Star Trek movie we're watching, where did this footage come from? Any camera footage of the Klingons on the Enterprise would have been destroyed along with the Enterprise, and where is the exterior footage of the ship coming from? I suppose you could say that the latter is from a satellite in orbit over Genesis, but this is never mentioned. And even if you want to say that is the case, it would have surely been destroyed when the Genesis planet blew up at the end of that movie. Star Trek V: The Final Frontier. Star Trek V is often regarded as one of the worst movies of the franchise, although I have to say I do have a soft spot for it. It does have more than a few plot holes though, including Starfleet sending Kirk on an important rescue mission with a Starship Enterprise that's not exactly in the best condition. In the movie, a renegade Vulcan named Sybok and his army of followers manage to hijack the Enterprise and set a course for the Great Barrier that is located at the center of the galaxy. They managed to get there in about 6 hours. Even at maximum warp, the Enterprise could not travel from Earth to Nimbus 3 to the center of the galaxy in the crew's lifetime. It would take thousands of years to make it one way. The distance from Earth to the center of the galaxy is about 22,400 light years. So unless a big part of the movie was deleted, or this Enterprise is the fastest ship to ever appear in the franchise, I think it's a plot hole. Star Trek VI: The Undiscovered Country. Star Trek VI is a great swan song for the original crew. It plays like a political thriller and was a real return to form for the franchise after the disappointment of Star Trek V. The final act of the movie involves Kirk and the Enterprise crew racing to stop an assassination attempt at the planet Khitomer, where peace talks between the Federation and the Klingon Empire are taking place. Once they get there, they are intercepted by a Klingon bird of prey that can fire torpedoes while it's cloaked, and a big space battle begins. The big plot hole here is that there is a shocking lack of security at this peace conference. The most important delegations of the Federation and the Klingon Empire are here, and there are no ships in orbit over the planet. There isn't even a shield to prevent beaming, as once the Enterprise destroys the bird of prey, they beam down right into the conference room. This is really hard to take seriously. Look at it this way. Can you imagine an important meeting between the United States and Russia, where the presidents of both nations are meeting, not having incredibly tight security? This doesn't ruin the movie for me, and it makes for a great climax to the film, but it's a really big plot hole. Star Trek Generations. Star Trek Generations, the first movie to feature the Next Generation crew, has some of the weirdest concepts of the entire franchise. The plot involves a space anomaly called the Nexus, where the laws of time and reality have no meaning. As the movie begins, Captain Kirk is assumed dead, while he is in fact caught in the Nexus, where 75 years later, Captain Picard is also pulled into it, and the two captains meet for the first time. Before all this happens, a mad scientist named Soren destroys a star, which in turn destroys the planet Viridian 3 and the Starship Enterprise and its entire crew. So while in the fantasy world of the Nexus, Picard asks Kirk to help him go back in time to stop Soren, and he agrees. They then go back in time about 10 minutes before Soren destroys the star and stop him, but Kirk dies in the process. There are so many things that don't make sense here, such as it's not made entirely clear whether they can actually go back in time, or just go back in time in the reality of the Nexus. In which case, it could be argued that every single Star Trek movie and TV show that's happened since 1994 is set in a fantasy reality. But that's another conversation. The biggest plot hole for me is that Picard and Kirk give themselves only 10 minutes to defeat Soren. Why make it so hard? You could have gone back in time to when Soren was a guest on the Enterprise and just arrested him right there. It just makes no sense. Star Trek First Contact. Star Trek First Contact is regarded by many as the best of the Next Generation movies. It features yet more time travel shenanigans as the Borg travel back to the 21st century to prevent mankind making the first warp speed flight and making contact with the Vulcans. This plan seems to be something that they came up with in an act of desperation, however. At the beginning of the movie, there is a huge space battle as the Borg attack Earth, and the entire Starfleet try to stop them. Picard and the Enterprise crew manage to destroy the Borg cube, but not before it fires off a sphere ship, which then goes back in time, with the entire Federation fleet watching. So the Enterprise follows them back in time and manages to spoil their plans. This plan by the Borg makes absolutely no sense. If they had the ability to go back in time all along, why bother attacking Earth in the first place? Why not just go back in time from their own homeworld and then travel to Earth to assimilate it, when it had no Starfleet to defend it? The future Starfleet would then cease to exist. Problem solved. No wonder the Borg kept on losing. They're idiots. Star Trek Insurrection. Star Trek Insurrection involves the Enterprise crew uncovering a plot by both the Federation and an alien race called the Sona to forcibly remove the peaceful Baku people from their planet. The planet's atmosphere contains radiation that reverses aging and has healing properties, which makes it extremely valuable. The Sona plan involves setting off a device in the planet's atmosphere that will make it uninhabitable. When Picard discovers this plot, he confronts Starfleet Admiral Dougherty about this and tries to argue against this plan going forward, to protect the people of the planet from losing their home. One of the possible options Picard proposes is for the Sona to set up a colony on the planet, and he's told that this won't work because most of the Sona won't survive that long, and it would take 10 years of normal exposure to begin to reverse their aging process. This didn't make sense, as Picard and several members of his crew were already being affected by the radiation of the planet, after being there for just a short time. Picard was beginning to look younger, Geordi's vision was restored, and Riker and Troy started acting like randy teenagers. Star Trek Nemesis. In the final Next Generation movie, the Enterprise is invited to Romulus to begin peace talks with the Romulan Empire. On arrival, they discover that there has been a military coup and that the Empire are now ruled by an evil, younger clone of Picard named Shinzon and his army of former slaves, the Remans. The Romulan military seems to go along with this for a while. However, during the movie's climax involving a battle between the Enterprise and Shinzon's ship, the Scimitar, the Romulan military have a change of heart and decide that they don't want to go along with Shinzon's plans anymore. Therefore, the mighty Romulan military send a grand total of 2 ships to help Picard and the Enterprise. 2 ships? Seriously? That's all they can spare? This is a very crucial mission. Is the Romulan homeworld as badly protected as Earth is in the Star Trek the Motion Picture? I know, it would have made for a much shorter movie. Star Trek. In the 2009 reboot of the Star Trek franchise, a Romulan mining ship from the 24th century is thrown back in time to the 23rd century and creates a new timeline where historical events are altered. The Romulan ship attacks the Federation starship Kelvin, but is damaged when said ship rams into it. Cut to 20 years later, and the Narada Oi now starts targeting Federation planets to destroy. The ship's captain Nero wants revenge as his home planet Romulus is destroyed in the future by its sun going nova. So why did he wait 20 years to do this? What was he doing all this time? They try to explain this in the line of looped dialogue that he was waiting for the elder Spock to arrive from the 24th century, but still doesn't explain why he did nothing all this time. For example, he could have made use of his time by contacting Romulus to warn them of their sun's destruction in a century's time, and tried to prevent this disaster. It just doesn't make sense. Originally, they had Nero and his crew captured by Klingons, and were prisoners for 20 years until their escape, but this was cut for time and pacing. It sacrifices the internal logic of the plot though. Star Trek Into Darkness. The entire plot of Star Trek Into Darkness revolves around the villain John Harrison. Okay, I mean Khan. waging a one-man war on the Federation. Khan is a genetically engineered superhuman from the 20th century, and his blood has healing properties which include curing illnesses, as well as apparently bringing the dead back to life. The climax involves Captain Kirk saving the Enterprise from burning up in the Earth's atmosphere by going into the ship's highly radioactive warp core area and jump-starting it back to life. Kirk dies, and Spock in a fit of rage goes after Khan. Okay, even if we suspend disbelief enough that Khan's blood can bring people back to life, why is McCoy so insistent that they capture Khan alive when they have at least 70 cryotubes with Khan's followers on board? I presume their blood has the same healing properties as Khan's. Also, once McCoy manages to bring Kirk back to life, he's basically cured death. No one has to worry about dying anymore. Of course, this is all conveniently forgotten by the time the next movie comes around. Star Trek Beyond. Star Trek Beyond concerns a villain named Krall, who was a human member of Starfleet who got stranded on an alien planet decades before the time of Kirk, and used alien technology to extend his lifespan. This had the effect of he and his soldiers taking on an alien appearance. Krall wants revenge on the Federation for supposedly abandoning him. In actual fact, they didn't abandon him. He and his crew were thought lost. Krall has alien technology and a whole fleet of swarm ships at his disposal, and like Nero in 2009's Star Trek reboot, simply waits for decades doing nothing apparently, until superweapon is brought to him. This makes no sense. If you wanted this superweapon so badly, you could have had someone steal it from the Enterprise at Yorktown Station. It seems like such an easier way to get it than take on the Federation flagship in space combat. Sometimes, these Star Trek villains don't think their plans through apparently. And that is it for this video showing a major plot hole in each Star Trek movie. This was just in the name of fun really, as I generally do enjoy all the Star Trek movies. Thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it and would like to see more, then please give it a like. Consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Share it with your friends, click the bell for notifications, and let me know in the comments, what do you think is the biggest plot hole in a Star Trek movie? Most importantly, I hope you all look after yourselves, and I'll see you all in my next video. Bye for now.